Well Met is directly supported by our listeners of the show. Head on over to patreon.com/wellmetpodcast and find out how you can get involved. Enjoy the show? Join our Discord community. Share deck lists, meet new friends, discuss strategy, and more at discord.me/wellmetpodcast. This episode of Well Met is brought to you by Legion by Lenovo and Intel. Find out more about Legion by Lenovo on Twitter and Facebook at Legion by Lenovo.
You're listening to Well Met.
Well Met.
A Hearthstone podcast brought to you by BlizzPro.com.
Well Met.
Everybody, welcome to episode number 111. 111th birthday. Sorry, I'm a Lord of the Rings guy. If you get that quote, send me an email. And first one to do it, I'm going to send you a t-shirt. Anyways, hey, welcome to episode 111 of Well Met. We're a Hearthstone podcast brought to you by BlizzPro.com. Today is June 12, 2017 from Studio 5 in Denver, Colorado. I'm John Horstman. With me, of course, is the crew. We've actually got a guest with us this week. It's a wild week in Hearthstone, pun intended. Anyways, and so we wanted to bring on somebody who could really emphasize what's going on in the world of wild Hearthstone this week. And so we brought on a listener of the show as well as high-end contributor to the wild community. And awesome gaming name, DannyDonuts. Danny, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, how's it going, guys? It's great to be here. Long-time listener of the show. I'm glad to be on it.
It was kind of funny how everything transpired. It transpired this morning of like, we need to change this up. Let's make this a wild show. You've been active in our Discord for a long time talking about wild, and I'm like, boom, that's the guy. Let's get him. And so it's going to be an awesome show. We're super happy to have you this week.
It's going to be a wild one.
Don't tell anybody about what goes on before the show. That's like it's like an exclusive club, the Well Met pre-show
yes, sir, my
club.
Lips are sealed. Lips are sealed.
Perfect.
It'd be a boring story anyway.
Anyways, from I almost said Saskatoon, from Kansas City, it's JR Cook. Hey, JR.
Hey, John, how's it going? I got a question for you, John.
Yeah.
You started the show now several times, many times, maybe 111 times.
111 times.
From Studio 5 in Denver, Colorado. And I've always been curious, why Studio 5?
So Studio 5 is actually new. Studio 5 is new. It's this setup that you see me in right now. And Studio 5 this is the 5th major iteration I've made on the studio. Since I started Well Met, since I joined Well Met for episode 1 and started my podcasting studio journey. So this is Studio 5. If I move or do a major revamp of it, it'll be Studio 6. So
shows how much I paid attention. I thought you were doing it this whole time.
No, I just
now somehow noticed it.
No, not at all. This is the second or third week I've called it Studio 5. So yeah, sorry. at least you caught it this time though. I mean, hey, thanks for asking. Anyways, let's go ahead and jump in. JR, I know you had one thing you wanted to talk about really quick before we jump into getting to know Danny a little bit better.
Sure. I was going to talk about THL a little bit, but I'm going to skip that because I lost and it sucked, but I'll do better next week. The main thing I did want to talk about though, was, this weekend, this upcoming Saturday, which is the 17th, if you're in the Kansas City area, there is still tickets for the KC Fireside, the Kansas City Fireside Gathering that we're having at the Boulevard Brewing Company. If you are 21 and over and want to come and partake in some Boulevard beer and wine and play some Hearthstone for a few hours and meet some awesome people, there are still tickets available over at kcfiresides.com. They are $25 a piece, and I would love to see you there.
Yeah, I'm super bummed I couldn't make it work to go this time around, but I'm pretty committed to making it 2-1 this year at some point. So have fun, have a beer for me, JR, and have a good time.
I will.
All
It'll be a good time. You will be missed.
All right. Well, let's get to know Danny a little bit here. So Danny, in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing in the Hearthstone community.
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing, like a lot of people say, I've been playing since beta. So getting to where I am now, pretty much what I've been doing is I started off as a normal player, just playing standard. And at one point when around Old Gods came out, I really started to feel that I really liked Wild better. I liked having the ability to play cards like Sludge Belcher, you have Loatheb, you have other anti-aggro cards, and I was not particularly a fan of some of the aggro Smork decks. So that really led me into the Wild community, and I got in at the ground level. From there, I got to essentially see the meta develop, see everything grow from the ground, because it was a rather small community in the beginning, and it's still relatively small compared to the normal like Reddit-sized Hearthstone community. But it's definitely on its way up. It's growing, and this tournament that came up this weekend is definitely showcases that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you a little bit more about. I got to watch, I would say, about 75% of the Wild tournament. It was kind of nuts. If you have an Apple TV, if you have the newest one and you have the App Store on it, there's an app called Quad Stream. What it lets you do is watch 4 streams at once on your TV. And so I had 2 of my favorite streamers open, and then I had the Wild open on one, and the Overwatch Contenders was also going on this weekend. So I had that open there, and I was keeping an eye on both, and just kind of felt really powerful having all these different streams open at once. So yeah, anyways, there's a tip for you Apple TV owners. I don't know if they have it on any other smart TV or platforms, but if they do, just check it out. I'm sure you'll find something. That's cool, man. Well, did you, I missed my question. So, here's something I'm going off the cuff here for a second while
Sure.
Chrome reboots. Hearthstone to me personally, one of the most difficult things to navigate through is the staleness of the game. Sometimes you deal with a lot of stale metas. Now with Wild only changing essentially once a year and only bringing in a smaller and smaller percentage of new cards, do you find that Wild kind of is kind of stale, or do you think that because you have those consistencies, there's a lot more opportunity, and there's so many more cards that there's a lot more opportunities for innovation?
I would definitely say it's the exact opposite of being stale, because there are so many cards. You can build so many different types of decks, and the little changes that you make to a deck will really stand out, like different anti-aggro cards, things that you'd never think of, like, I don't know, a Noyotron. You never really think about using that in certain decks, but playing that is definitely really entertaining when you make a little tiny shift to the meta to counter different things. And the vast card pool is definitely, it gives you a lot of toys to play around with.
Cool. Okay. I know it's like, I'm on the mic, but you can say, no, John, you're wrong. I'm 100% okay with that. Sure. Feel free to just be like, no, John, you're wrong. It's about 3 memes away from being a well-met t-shirt. So keep that going. That's totally fine.
I'm already making that t-shirt right now, John, by the way.
So Danny, how do you stay up to date? There's a lot of stuff going on in Hearthstone, and I imagine it's the same. And you're contributing to the new Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report for the wild side of things. You're playing the game at a high level. How are you staying up to date?
Sure. So besides the normal going on the Reddit, competitive Hearthstone, the Hearthstone Reddit, I typically stick to some of the Discords that's where a lot of the conversation happens, in my opinion. Yeah. We actually have one. It's the Wild Hearthstone Discord, where a lot of the wild stuff goes down. I think we had 10 people from our Discord, maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure. One guy actually got one away, made the tournament. Qualified for the tournament. So we got a lot of people who are pretty good, and we like to communicate there. So a lot of interchanging of ideas there.
Discord is such a freaking cool tool. Like, I love Reddit. Amazing. Don't get me wrong. I spend a lot of time on Reddit. I'm also like a very mobile heavy user. I'm like a min-maxer when it comes to like the different platforms I have and all those things. Discord has changed my life. So I'm not joking. If you're listening to this show and you heard it at the bumper in the beginning, join our Discord and join these other Discord communities. It's overwhelming to have like 30 Discord servers, but even if you start by joining 1 or 2 and getting involved in those communities, it's awesome. Discord.me/WellMatPodcast. Go right there. Okay. All right, Danny, two more questions and we're moving on. Actually, 3. What's your most memorable moment as a Hearthstone player or spectator? So it could have been a moment you witnessed or one that you were directly involved in, besides being on the show.
My most memorable moment would probably be the Reynad text-to-speech stream. That was I was in that chat, and that was one of the most funniest moments that I've ever had with regards to Hearthstone.
Can you give us the PG version of that for those who may not have been a part of the
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I think it was the first time that Reynad turned on text to speech, and a bunch of people donated things in, and like the amount of memery that went around in that chat was off the levels.
Memery.
It was off the chart.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Cool. That was a really good PG way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of them were a little bit non-PG, but just go check it out yourself.
Yeah, for sure. If you're okay, there are some crazy ones.
Yeah, there are some that are a little
tasteless. I mean, if you've been to a Reynad stream before, it's one of the least modded large communities on Twitch, I would say. So you've got that. All right, next one. This one should be easy. What's your favorite card in Hearthstone?
I'm gonna go with Lotheb. You gotta go. If you guys don't know, for you non-wild viewers, 5 mana, 5/5. Next turn, your enemy spells cost 5 more. With the way that the meta is developing and everything, you can play it in almost every deck. You play it in a control deck to try to counter some combo from Miracle Rogue coming through, or you can stop aggro druid going and savage roaring your board. I think that's my favorite thing because you interact with your opponent on their turn, which is a little bit light in Hearthstone.
Bring back Lotheb. Bring back. I get it. I want a Michael Jordan, Brett Favre coming out of retirement thing for Lotheb to bring it back into standard, because I loved Lotheb, even though we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but the initial kind of design concept for Lotheb is pretty interesting. So we'll chat about that for a second. And last one, what are you most looking forward to from Hearthstone in the rest of 2017?
Well, in the near future, next month, I'm looking forward to the Wild Championship. That should be a blast. See some really powerful, really, really good players put together on the big stage.
Awesome. Cool. There it is. That's a little bit about DannyDonuts. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at DannyDonuts_HS. And we'll tell you where to find him everywhere else at the end of the show. Let's jump into the news.
Journey to Ungoro.
Wrong one.
This
Wrong
week in
one.
Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft.
Pressing buttons is hard. Before we get started, we do want to thank our well-met legends, Albert T, TheRealBen, and Correl. Thank you so much for your support of Well Met. If you want to continue to support the show, help us bring on awesome guests, help us make our show look and sound great, or, you know, just support the hosts who dedicate their time and effort into making this show great, head on over to patreon.com/wellmetpodcast. Find out how you can get involved. So, first things first, we've got a new Hearthstone Mulligans episode coming up, and it is a doozy, that is for sure. The Gul'dan, Jaina, and Uther and that one guy are going to an art gallery, I guess, and Gul'dan gets all insightful about the piece of art they're looking at. JR, what did you think about this one? Does it live up to Shotgun?
It does not live up to Shotgun. I honestly, I didn't find it that amusing. I was like, okay, that was a thing, I guess. It felt like the first one to me, where I'm just like, yeah. Shotgun, but Shotgun was so great. I don't know if it can be topped. So I do enjoy the fact that they are doing these. Like people keep calling them ads, but it's not really an ad in my opinion. It's just a fun little short video that they're putting out once a week. Kind of similar to the little projects that they did with like World of Warcraft back in the day, where they did that weird Azeroth choppers thing.
Yeah.
Or, you know, those, or the one where they were making like that Armorsmith guy was making like some of the weapons from the game or things like that. You know, I don't really consider those ads either, even though they kind of are. These are just fun little, just short videos that I think the most interesting thing to me about these videos, though, is I'm analyzing them way too much on wondering if the guy is imagining these characters behind them or if they're really there. And that whole psychoanalysis thing going on. Like, is Gul'dan the devil and the bad guy? And is Uther, you know, like the good guy, you know, the old like right and left shoulder thing going on?
Gul'dan's always talking about souls. He's always like, oh, I mean, that's the classic warlock thing. But still, if you want to look at it from that thing, he's always talking about reaping souls.
It's like the Tom and Jerry little angel devil on the shoulder thing. Yeah.
And then you throw in sarcastic Jaina out of nowhere
then
to
you have Jaina
talk bad about ex-girlfriends or something. You know.
Maybe it's more like the 7 deadly sins than it is good and evil. But yeah, I like that. JR, I did not know that you'd be so insightful about a series that you were so quick to be like, I don't really know. Shotguns forever. So
hey, I still watch it, so they've got that going for them.
It's true. I will always watch these as well. I really like them. Danny, what do you think, man? Are you a fan of this series? Were you a fan of this one?
Yeah, well, I like the whole thing in general. I definitely feel that Shotgun was the best one. But they were actually pretty good in the Wild Tourney. They had them as the bumpers instead of ads. So I thought that was pretty neat. It was a pretty good use of them.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, they're just fun to talk about. We always talk about them every week that they come out because it's fun. I don't want them to make this a TV show. Some of the plot lines are a little on the nose and rehashed, but you know, hey, more power to them. Next
better
up,
than Guac Boy.
That's my guac. Anyways, sorry.
Oh.
That was not that bad actually. Anyways, Kripparrian pressed the button this week, which was pretty exciting. It blew up the internet, despite it being like the least climactic thing to ever happen in Hearthstone. But
also the most predictable, in my opinion.
Right? It's like, what did you expect to happen? It's like when people tune in for like the Super Bowl halftime show now, because we had like 3 years where things just were messed up and they just expect things to get messed up every time. But this did not happen. So JR, can you kind of give us the highlights here on like what is the button and why is Kripp pressing it?
Yeah, so the button in this case is the mass disenchant button. And Kripp has been saving up all of his duplicates and not pressing that button for a long, long time, since basically the beginning of Hearthstone. The idea was, I believe, that he was going to press it once he had enough to be able to craft a full golden set of everything that was out. But it was to the point where they're bringing out cards faster than what he could get dust. So he was never going to be able to hit that. So he finally decided that, I believe at 1 million followers, it might have been more than that. I don't remember the number.
It was 1 million. Yeah.
Okay. That he would finally press the button. And the button had a little bit of history behind it. Because I remember Ben Bro talking about this like a year or so ago, that if Kripp had pressed that button about a year or so ago, it would have crashed Hearthstone. And they were talking about being afraid of that and having to go in and fix it. But Blizzard themselves didn't even know what would happen when he pressed that button because they were never able to fully test it on that much dust. But they knew that it wouldn't bring down all of Hearthstone. So, and that did not happen. So that's good.
So
however, go ahead.
He was talking about that in his stream before he actually pressed the button. He went in, he said that he was talking with Blizzard about what would happen if he did it. And they were like, okay, as long as it just doesn't crash the servers, we're fine. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. So what you're essentially saying is because of Kripp's hoarding of dust, we can blame him for getting, waiting 3 years for deck codes and deck importing, exporting. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because they were too busy trying to make sure that the servers wouldn't crash when he pressed the button finally. That's a yeah.
Hashtag blame Kripp, please. I'm just kidding. Never pick a fight with Kripp, that's for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's something to talk about. It was noteworthy, but there's not really a story here except that somebody amassed over 600,000 dust. So
and when he pressed it, like, you didn't get the animations or anything because it crashed his game.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Wamp wamp.
Have you guys seen the Reddit videos of the people who edit it together?
Yeah.
They edited it together to make it look like all the stuff was all the bits were going. There's actually a really good Reddit video.
Oh,
Yep.
I haven't seen that. That's really cool.
So you can go watch those videos to be satisfied that you didn't get to see all of the bits get broken down.
Good. All right. So the next thing that we've got going on here, this one was pretty cool. The Hearthstone Twitter showed us a little bit of a sneak peek into some like very preliminary designs of Curse of Naxxramas, and it's pretty interesting. So like we're literally looking at a Excel spreadsheet basically from the picture that we got here. But here are some interesting, these are my favorite. Mr. Bigglesworth is a 0 mana 0/1 legendary with charge. So have fun with that flame tongue totem and that kind of stuff. That'd be pretty cool. There's also Lotheb 1.0, which is a 6 mana 4/8 legendary that reads health cannot be restored. They haven't clarified on if it's just that minion's health or any health anywhere, but I'm pretty sure it's any health anywhere. Opponent.
That's the way I read it.
Or yeah, they normally say your minion's health cannot be, this minion's health cannot be restored, or your character's health cannot be restored. Your opponent's health cannot be restored. So I really like that one. And then Shatter is a 4 mana mage spell that destroys all frozen minions. Do you guys have any thoughts on these 3 cards before we talk about a few others of our favorites?
I think the Lothar 1.0 would have been really interesting. And keep in mind, once this health cannot be restored, I'm sure, this was before any iterations would have happened on getting their correct wording down. It might have probably said all characters' health cannot be restored at some point if it would have gotten released. But I think that's a really cool concept and would have been nice to have had something like that later on during the Reno days. Or, something to that effect where they weren't able to heal. They would have had to get rid of this card in order to end up playing Reno. I think that could have had some really cool interactions. However, the bad thing about this card is it completely screws over Priest, right? Because Priest loses their hero power, and there's no other card in the game, in my opinion, that would hurt a character class that badly.
Priest against aggro at that point, you're pretty much done. So in any aggressive deck, Lothar is going to be like an auto include at that point. Right,
and he's a 4/8. Keep in mind, so Priest already has a difficult time dealing with that.
Yeah, and you can't heal to recover, so it's ridiculous on that. What do you think about the Mage Shatter spell card?
I'm not a huge fan of those. I'm just not a huge fan of it. They already have something similar to that where you can kill one minion that is already frozen.
Ice Lance?
Yeah. Or no, they have a similar one. I don't remember the card name.
The current iteration of Shatter.
Current iteration of Shatter. But I'm just I never get into a situation where you have a bunch of cards that are going to be frozen unless you use Blizzard. And then at that point, you're already doing 2 damage to everything. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me to combo that with
Frost Nova.
That would be really
easy. It's it's an additional flame strike that you can put in. And you got to realize at this point, it's Naxxramas. So the amount of cards that are out the card pool's really small. So in its time, it could have been pretty interesting because you don't have that many board clears. There are not that many Death Rattle minions.
Freeze Mage was definitely a thing, and you're right. Frost Nova into Shatter would have been extremely powerful, but instead they used Frost Nova with Doomsayer and got the same effect.
Look at you guys. I step away for a minute, and you guys are just going at it. I'm just going to hit the record button, let it sit. JR, you had a couple of your favorites picked out here.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones that I saw that I thought was really interesting was Saffron, who was a 8 attack, 8 health, 9 mana dragon, basically. It doesn't say dragon on the card, but he would have been a dragon. Battle Cry, deal 3 damage to a minion and the minions next to it, then freeze them. So you almost get kind of that Blizzard type effect to a very specific group of minions. And so positioning when you're playing against that card would be very important. And I find that those cards are rather interesting. The other one that I really liked was a Paladin spell called Turn Evil, which was for 3 mana, give a random friendly minion +2/+2, and a random enemy minion -2/-2. And I really, really dig this card because you don't see any other cards really in Hearthstone like this, where you are buffing up your guys and at the same time debuffing their guys, and it's random. So I think that's a really cool effect that I would still actually like to see in the game.
The debuff is pretty cool too, because it's not the normal either deal 2 damage or whatever. It's actually remove that health. So you can't, if you're a priest or something, you can't heal that up. I feel that that's pretty cool as well. That's a really interesting tidbit of it.
Yeah. Or if they only had, or if it happened to a 2 health creature, it would have just killed it outright.
Yeah.
Because it can't have 0 health.
Right. Danny, did you have any favorite ones here besides the ones that we've already talked about?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting to look at their original version of Shade of Naxxramas. So, we all know what the actual card was. If you don't remember, it's a 2/2 that cost 3 that had stealth, and it had the same effect, but it's it's so much more powerful in the current version. And a lot of the stuff that you see in the original, in all these original cards, that they're very powerful. They were like nerfed down in development. This is one of the cards that actually got buffed throughout that process.
Yeah.
And we all know how big Shade of Naxxramas was when Combo Druid was around. When you had to stay above 14 health to stay around, play around Savage Roar and Force of Nature. So it's interesting to see why they buffed that up. I actually think it's pretty cool to see that was the first form of it.
That's really interesting. I read past it and I didn't even think about that, but it's Shade of Naxxramas was initially a 4-mana 1/1 with the same card text, which is stealth. Where is it now? Stealth. At the start of your turn, gain +1/+1. So that's exactly that current iteration, but it was a 3-mana 2/2, which is significantly better. They buffed it up and made it cost less. That's a double buff. So what we like to talk about.
It was a really good card to play in Druid.
Yeah, played it in a couple of different decks, but yeah, Druid was for sure the one that it saw the most play in. So that went on this weekend as well, and our good friend Kevin Hoftestad tweeted out. I guess he had a hand in kind of helping out and bringing that into Twitter. They're like, if you want to get more of this type of insight, let us know, and we'll work on cool ways to show you some other different designs and parts about Hearthstone that we may not have seen yet. Come soon. Okay, so we need to discuss some esports news here, because it's been a big week for Wild Hearthstone. And with that, we had the Hearthstone Wild Open qualifiers this week. And so it was the top 64 players who qualified from May. And the top 8 are going to a live finals. So, Danny, can you just give us like a high level overview on what we saw this weekend from this tournament?
Yeah, sure. So all this started back in May with the Play Hearthstone tweeting out the top 64 people on ladder for Wild would be able to participate. So the climb to top 64 happened all last month, and the tournament ended up starting up yesterday. It came to a conclusion at that point, and it was top 64 of each region. So it boiled down. Each region got to put 2 people through to the finals, and I think the finals are being held in California later in July.
Cool. So it is kind of nice. Now you're a Wild player for the most part. At least that's what you're doing right now for Hearthstone. Is what does this tournament mean for? It's not like your scene, but the scene that you're in. What does this tournament mean for you guys? This
is the first major Wild support that we've gotten, besides the Heroic Tavern Brawl, which happened at about the same time. But it's the first support that we're actually getting, and the community's been really looking forward to have something to rally behind. And being able to say, if you're on ladder and you're playing High Legend and Standard, you're like, oh, I played against this guy at this point. I play against that guy at this point. Where now you're you're watching these tournaments and you're like, I know this guy. I know this guy. And it's really cool to see some of the Standard faces trying to put their hat in the ring in the Wild. Like I saw, you see like Firebat playing some Wild. You have Kibler. You have some other names, Strifecrow making the tournament. You have Silent Storm playing in the NA. You got some big names actually coming through.
Yeah, that was definitely really cool to see. And it was just really nice of a way to like kind of mix it up a little bit, I guess, is the way it kind of felt to me, is just kind of mixing those things up. But I actually found, for me personally, I actually really liked watching the Wild version of Hearthstone. I'm not ready to say like, oh, this is way better and I want this all the time. I don't know if I'm ready to go to that side of the Wild player base yet. But I am willing to say that at least this weekend, I enjoyed watching this over Hearthstone Global Games or Star Ladder, which both, we had Global Games obviously this week and last week, but Star Ladder just concluded. And that says a lot for me. It was the freshness of the decks. You even look, and outside of, I think it was Pirate Warrior, the decks were for the most part pretty diverse in the top 8. There was nothing like, when you look at the top 8 of a standard tournament, 7 to 8 of all of the top 8s have probably 2 of their 4 or 5 decks shared the same. And in this one, it was maybe 1. You've got maybe a third of those players actually have some conflicting deck lists. And that was really refreshing to see. And I think one of the strengths to Wild as a format altogether. Were there any decks that performed especially well, or should have performed especially well this past weekend?
Yeah, sure. Aggro Shaman was really good. Blast from the past. But Aggro Shaman was rolling people over. It was going and it was killing Reno locks after Reno had been played, and then after like Bran Healbot. It just has so much reach. So Aggro Shaman is actually really powerful in the tournament format, and a couple players capitalized on that.
Turns out 4-mana 7/7s are pretty good, guys. Especially
when they attack face 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
There's one game, I don't remember particularly who, but they just couldn't get rid of the 4-mana 7/7.
Weird. Who would have thought that you had hard removal by turn 4 and 5? Okay, cool. Here's something I was wondering. As a spectator and as somebody who hasn't spent a lot of time in Wild, in standard, when you go to these standard tournaments and you watch these standard tournaments, the decks are what I would say, for the most part, are very refined, right? Everybody's playing them on the standard ladder. There's these huge practice groups to make these better. There's weekly cups going on so that you can practice your lineup against other lineups. There's a lot more theory crafting that can be done on your specific decks and your entire lineups for those standard tournaments. Did you feel that the decks were as refined in a Wild type tournament, or were they a little bit more, dare I say, wild?
Yeah, well, they're definitely not as refined, like you said, due to the amount of practice that you put in standard. But the one thing I feel was not refined enough was the actual lineups, the class selection, and how you were planning to play. And that might be because the players are all typically ladder players. Whereas in most tournaments that you see nowadays, you'll have players who are dedicated specifically to tournaments. And most of the people who got top 64 Legend in Wild were all ladder players. There's an example of one player who is specifically a Mali Shaman player, and they got in, and from that point, like, they're known for the Mali Shaman, but maybe they might not particularly be as well versed with some of the other decks.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, but obviously playing up at higher Legend, you do start to see the same 28 cards in a list. There are refinements, and a lot of people have arguments over what's good and what's not, but we don't have as big of a player base to go and specifically to refine it down with as much play with the decks.
Sure. That makes sense.
And I wonder too, like, even in standard though, like, a lot of players that make it to tournaments are also ladder players. And I just wonder if the real difference there might also be the fact that this is the first tournament that we've had for Wild. Therefore, the people that have been playing Wild don't necessarily have that tournament experience that ladder players on the standard side would have gotten with tons and tons of different open events and things like that, where they are also not only laddering and doing well on the ladder, but also being able to play in these tournaments as well, because Wild just hasn't had the tournament scene.
Yeah, well, I definitely agree. It's the first tournament, like you said, so there's going to be some bumps in the road, but I love Blizzard for coming in and giving us this support and actually showcasing some of it.
Yeah, because if you think back at like the beginning of Hearthstone and its tournament scene, it almost feels very similar in a way, where people were still playing around with how lineups would work and things like that. So it was actually really cool to see, in my opinion, to see that kind of thing where you're kind of taking a step back to nearly 3 years ago when Hearthstone was still fresh.
Yeah, definitely.
Look at you guys talking about all these things and stuff. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time left on this. I lost my link with the winners. I know it was board control, right? Control from
Control the
Karma.
board. Yeah.
Control the board. Yeah. And I know he was there, but who are kind of some of the top players to qualify? If you don't know off the top of your head, that's totally fine. So I dropped the ball.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I have a list here. I know that let's see. McNuggets also made that from NA. So I play mostly NA, so I see those guys.
Control from Canada.
Control and McNuggets are two big Wild players. I don't remember who won EU or Asia, unfortunately.
Got it. No worries. Sorry, but on that spot, I'm like, you know what? I never actually went for the final results list because I'm a rank 15 NA podcaster. So let's go into the meta really quick. So this has been, again, a historic week for Hearthstone because Wild has been getting a lot of love in Hearthstone right now, and it's been kind of cool and kind of refreshing. We just kind of talked about the Wild Open that we just had this past weekend, and we have more of it coming up soon. But one of the most renowned and utilized tools, the Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report, has gone wild. And Danny, you were one of the contributors on this, on the article, on the content. And so, first of all, tell us how you got being involved with Vicious Syndicate for it, and what kind of your contributions have all looked like in taking it from cool, we want to do this, to like, cool, here it is. Yeah,
sure. So we at the Wild Hearthstone subreddit had been releasing a tier list monthly for about 5 or 6 months now. And Vicious Syndicate actually reached out to us. They said that there's always been an interest in the Wild Data Reaper report, but they didn't have the core staff to actually produce the content. And they had found out that there was enough interest at this moment that they were looking for some content writers to go and start working on it. So they thought that a partnership with us would be perfect to get the ball rolling. And so at the end of when our tier list was released last month, they contacted us, and we've been setting up all the logistics ever since. And we got that out on Sunday.
Awesome. So what did it look like from your perspective? So were you just like, this is what I think? Were you in charge of interpreting some of the data? What is your contribution look like?
Vicious Syndicate was responsible for getting all of the data. They did all the collection. They went through and they did the class radars, where you would go in and see the cards that are used in each decks, and sorting all of that out. But we on the Wild Hearthstone staff got together and really, essentially, we analyzed the data with some direction from them, obviously. And then we also went and comprised the deck class reviews.
Got it.
So we got that, and essentially we came up with the specific deck lists based off of high legend players and other people who have broken the meta, essentially.
Any particular parts that were pretty heavily you?
You can pretty much the introduction and most of the data analysis is me, but it was a huge team effort. We have maybe 10 to 12 people who are working on it, so I don't want to take credit of any one section.
By all means, yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, hey, that's great, and congratulations to you guys on getting this out. I know people have really been looking forward to seeing some data based on this. We've had Tempo Storm's wild meta report for a while, but we haven't really seen any hard-coded data on, you know, what the meta really looks like with, you know, thousands of games to back that up. And we finally have that here. And on this show, we'll be the first ones to admit we're kind of wild novices. Danny, you've been listening to the show for a while. We don't talk a lot about Arena. We don't talk a lot about Wild. We're kind of standard tournament dudes. And so this is, you know, definitely kind of new for us to kind of talk about. Do you have any concerns that providing this type of valuable resource, do you think that there's any chance for it to diminish the wildness of Wild?
Well, I wouldn't say it's diminishing the wildness of Wild. Up at the higher ranks, we've been submitting these deck lists and the tier lists for the past 5 or 6 months. And the meta had already been starting to shape up a little bit. Like you would start to see some net decking at around rank maybe 12 or so. A lot of people make their homebrew decks, and you would really start to get into it. Rank 5, it's just like the standard ladder. You're going to go in, maybe you'll see the off-color deck, but it's typically one of the main archetypes. And now I think with this being able to reach out to more people, it's going to bump that level down a little bit. But the sheer power of the decks in Wild just allow for so much more to happen. Like it's essentially like in a video game when you have, I don't know, like a sports video game where you have the all-star mode where you can have Michael Jordan play against LeBron James. That's what Wild is. And being able to play all these decks, you can have all the crazy, you have so many decks battling head-to-head, the highest power level.
Yeah. And just for the record, Michael Jordan would win that every time.
Oh, yeah. I completely agree. Completely agree.
Oh, God. Okay. So, God dang it, JR. All right.
Had to.
So let's talk about some of these decks here. So just to give people kind of a brief overview, and this is using information directly from the Data Reaper report for Wild for this past week. First and foremost, it sounds like, just like in Standard, Pirate Warrior plays a pretty significant role in the health of the Wild meta, at least from what I interpreted. Does that sound about right, Danny?
Oh, yeah. Pirate Warrior's the guardian at the gates. You have to attack from different oblique angles to try to go and beat Pirate Warrior. If you're trying to be too greedy, essentially Pirate Warrior keeps you in check.
Okay. And what's this? So mid-range Paladin, though, is kind of like mid-range Paladin has seen kind of an interesting thing. If you look on the screen or if you check it out later, you'll see mid-range Paladin at all ranks has a 57% win rate. At rank 5 to 1, it's got a 50. I think this is 56. And I think at Legend, it's 55. So it's in 4 percentage points over the next deck, which is Pirate Warrior. So what's going on with mid-range Paladin here?
Sure. So the mid-range Paladin matchup against Pirate Warrior is, really strong. It's extremely strong. I mean, you can win games with mid-range Paladin, and because of that, and you're facing so many, and you're able to spiral out of control against control decks, beat them down with your mid-range cards, and you're able to at least stay competitive with the aggro, just puts it in a prime spot. One of the big things we found, too, was that the mid-range decks in Wilds, because of the new Ungoro cards, it's one of the most unrefined decks. So its current win rate percentage, and now that we've released this, we expect the play rate of mid-range Paladin and the possibly the percentage played to go up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? I mean, if it takes Standard's lead, you see, oh, this deck is really good. People will play it more. You get more mirror matches, which means that you probably end up with a slightly lower win rate here, because these win rates include mirror matches, correct?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so you're gonna probably see that diminished a little bit. Probably why you see Pirate Warrior too. If you take out like the Pirate Warrior matchups, I would be really interested to see what those win rates look like when you remove the mirror matches. But mid-range Paladin is in a really interesting spot, that it's one of those like flourishing decks that's just getting there. You could almost call it a meta breaker, except that its popularity and win rate's so high that you can't really, avoid it, I guess, is what I would say. So there's a third class that, to me at least, kind of sticks out as really powerful in the wild meta, and that's Shaman. What's going on? Would you say that those are the three: Paladin, Shaman, and Paladin, Shaman, and Warrior? Or would you say that there might be another class jockeying for that kind of third spot or second spot or all the spots?
Yeah, well, I definitely feel that Shaman is the most versatile class in Wild. You have it's represented with all its archetypes. You have the aggro Shaman, you have the mid-range Jade Shaman, you have the control Shaman, which is surprisingly good. The reincarnate and having all of those really high-level cards, it's actually pretty good against the Pirates. And you also have the combo variant with Malygos. So I would definitely say that Shaman's pretty high up there.
Cool. So if you had to, because we can't do it very well, if you had to say, all right, here's Wild, here's what you should prepare for. We're brand new players looking to go in and start playing Wild here in June. And you're like, I want to prepare you as best as I can. And, just a few minutes. What would you tell them about Wild in the ladder?
Sure. Expect to play a lot of Pirates. So that's one of the first things. There's going to be a lot of Pirates on the ladder, and you definitely see that compared to the Standard. It's definitely higher. From there, we expect to see a bump in Paladin after this report has been released, because the #1 deck typically gets a lot of net deckers. So if you're going into this looking for a meta breaker, my personal opinion is that something like mid-range or aggro Shaman would be good to counter the Paladin, because Paladin typically works in the mid-range more or less like a token type of deck. And having the early board clears like Maelstrom Portal, and then being able to compete with both Pirates and these new upcoming Paladins is going to be really big.
Cool. That makes a lot of sense. JR, anything to add here, or are you fine spectating I am?
I'm just looking down this list, and I'm going, man, this is like a best of through Hearthstone, in my opinion. You're seeing Reno Lock, you're seeing Control Warrior, you're seeing Aggro Shaman, you're seeing Secret Paladin, and all these decks that through the times have aggravated me, and I have also played. I think the thing that sucks the most about this, though, and this is a completely different topic, so I won't go deep into it, is the fact that they nerfed cards instead of moving them to the Hall of Fame earlier. For example, we would probably see a lot more mid-range Shaman or mid-range Druid
if you had
these lists. Face Hunter, for example, we would probably see more of, and things like that if they had chosen to move cards to the Hall of Fame instead of just nerfing them outright. So I Handlock would be a huge
I was an old school Handlock player. I was really pissed when they nerfed the
And I really wish that we would see those decks in here, and I think it's kind of unfortunate that we don't. But these other ones, Blast of the Past, if you really want to go back and play those decks, I highly recommend to take up Wild and play that old stuff.
Well, and it's the kind of thing too where you're not going to get left in the cold, right? Where hopefully this is the first of a more consistent way for Wild players to have fun and have something to work towards, if that makes sense. You know, for me, it's honestly, I think if you gave me HCT Standard and HCT Wild, I might gravitate towards HCT Wild. I honestly, based on the conversation,
it's a refreshing experience.
Yeah, it's really cool, and like that might be something I want to do. There are obvious reasons why HCT Standard is the premier format for Hearthstone, but getting this type of consistent exposure going forward, I think could be great for the Hearthstone scene overall. And I think that this is a really cool thing that the Hearthstone team is doing. I hope that they continue to keep doing it. And, you know, hopefully from there we see some more cool stuff, because it is very much something that, you know, you put it as LeBron James versus Michael Jordan. It's the all-star games when it comes to this. Something that really surprised me, though, and it's kind of echoed in Standard right now, too, though, is that we don't have any Warlock decks in Tier 1 or Tier 2. Can you speak at all to why? Like, I expected Zulok to be great in Standard. That was one of the first things I looked for. But it looks, at least according to this information, that Warlock isn't doing so hot right now.
Yeah, Zoo isn't too strong against the aggro warrior. When you're playing against pirates, they just have such an explosive start, and especially in Wild, you have Ship's Cannon, which is devastating against in the Warlock matchup. The ships can't, because Warlock's playing for board control, and essentially what aggro warrior is, it's a faster version of Zip. So it's not an aggressive. I mean, it is an aggro deck, but it's best to consider it like you would consider a faster Zoo deck. It's more board control in the first 2-3 turns, and then take over.
Got it. What about Hunter? Because Hunter is also one that's kind of missing from those top tier decks. What's going on with Hunter right now?
Yeah, Hunter, it's in a bit of a weak spot, but there are definitely some people who are trying to innovate with Hunter. I know one person, Zed, who's actually going to get Legend playing exclusively Hunter in Wild. So it's definitely possible to go, and he was playing some mid-range Hunter. It's definitely possible to go and push yourself at that point. No deck is essentially dead in Wild. You have enough tools. If you counter the meta properly, you can go in and get some pretty good wins.
I'm curious to how much Reno might affect Hunter, because I feel like that was the card that really neutralized Hunter when it came out. And I'm curious if that's the same in Wild or not.
Yeah, back maybe about 2 or 3 seasons ago, I would definitely agree with you on that. But mid-range Paladin at the moment is actually knocking all of the Reno decks down a notch. And that's why you'll see Reno Lock and Reno Priest and Reno Mage a little bit lower than you would expect. I think it's because of the mid-range Pally. And from there, I think that you're going to see an uptick in Hunters, because now you don't have to deal with Reno healing them back up, and you can just keep tapping the hero power.
Yeah. It is a very interesting thing. I mean, looking at these, the Wild Power rankings, you have 12 decks between 48 and 52%. And then you've got a few higher, 3 higher. And then you've got some that are lower. Mid-range Hunter, at least according to this one, is the lowest rated class at 44%, 45% across the board. So it's really interesting to me to see. I honestly, outside of, don't get me wrong, 57, 56, 50, 55% win rate for a top tier deck is huge. That's really high. A 57% win rate deck probably wouldn't stay the same in standard format. I think 55 is where they start looking at nerfing and making some changes. That's Undertaker Hunter Days, I believe, is 55. That's Grim Patron as well at top tier legend. So besides that, it actually looks really similar and really balanced toward, as an actual balanced, quote unquote, balanced meta, even when compared to standard. And it really seems to me the only advantage to standard is that you remove cards as you add them rather than just add. So I think that's really cool. Is there anything else that you guys want to hit on here in the first Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper report? Anything that you think our listeners should know about?
I think we covered it up pretty well. I want to thank Vicious Syndicate for helping us let us get this whole report out and get it out to the community.
Yeah. No, that is really cool that they do that. And big thanks to all the people who put in that hard work, because that's a lot of hard work. Okay. Like, it's that type of stuff. It's not simple, and it takes a lot of dedicated and passionate people to make that happen. So kudos to you, first of all, Danny, for being one of those dedicated, passionate people. And kudos to Vicious Syndicate for bringing those people together. That's like really cool. I do have some bad news though. And the bad news is, because of how long we talked about Wild, we really don't have time to talk about sequencing this week. So we're going to just pocket it, I think, and do it a different week, because I want to give that the time that it needs to go. So next week, hopefully, we're going to talk about some sequencing in Hearthstone. And man, Danny, dude, you crushed it this week, man. I really enjoyed having you on the show and bringing your expertise, because not only are you like an expert at wild stuff, you're just like a Hearthstone expert. You think about the game. So I was still complimenting you. So you think about the game very interestingly and deeply. So I want to thank you, for being willing to come onto the show with us this week.
Oh, it was a pleasure to be on. I'm honored that you guys let me come on the show. Yeah. It was a really fun time.
Awesome. And if you want to hear more from DannyDonuts, send us emails to wellmet@blizzpro.com, and I can make it happen. I think I can make it happen. Anyways, let's go ahead and get out of here. If you've got ideas for the show, comments, or questions, send us your emails to wellmet@blizzpro.com. And Patreon, we do want to thank our new patrons, John T, Justin T, and Matthew S. We did miss a show last week, which means that we're actually going to do a makeup episode, and I can't confirm who it's with yet, but I'm going to be sitting down with a pretty amazing community member doing a little one-on-one talking about Hearthstone, and it's going to be pretty fun. I'm hoping to do that this week or next week, so that'll be on soon. So you're going to get a bonus episode later in the month. Anything going on in iTunes land, JR?
It does not look like we have any new iTunes reviews this week. However, if you would like to give an iTunes review, just head over to iTunes, type in, do a search by podcast, type in Hearthstone. Should find Well Met right there. If you leave a 5-star review, we will thank you on the show next week.
Yeah.
And I will mispronounce your name or pronounce your name correctly. Either one could happen. Let's see what happens. So leave a 5-star review.
Yes. And by the way, we do want to thank our Well Met legends, Albert T, TheRealBen, and Correl. Thank you so much for your support of the show. And if you're like, hey, this show is pretty cool, I really appreciate the free content that they put out every week. And, here's a cup of coffee every month or whatever. Head on over to patreon.com/wellmetpodcast. Find out how you can get involved. Our Discord is hopping. We're having awesome conversations about Hearthstone all throughout the week. We'd love for you to join us, patron or not. at discord.me/wellmetpodcast. All right, Danny, this is the part of the show where you get to talk about everything. Where can people find you? Who do you want to thank? All that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I want to thank all of the, first off, I want to thank Vicious Syndicate for helping us to produce this wild report and get all of this rolling. I also want to thank all of the wild experts who helped on our team to write the report. I want to put, you can follow me on Twitter at DannyDonuts_HS. And I want to implore that you guys check out our Discord. You want to go to the Wild Hearthstone Discord and the Ask Hearthstone Discord. We got some really good conversations going on. Like I said earlier, some of the top wild players are in the Wild Hearthstone. I think we got 10 people into the tournament. And 2 of the top NA finishers are both in the Discord. So come check it out. We're a bunch of really cool people.
Awesome.
Like to have a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I'm joining up right after this. JR, what about you, man? Shout outs for the week, and where can people find you?
I need to give a shout out to Danny here for coming on the show and giving us that wild knowledge. And I learned a lot this show, so I'm sure our listeners did as well.
It was a lot for us too, yeah.
Yeah. If you want to find me, just go over to Twitter at Eldorian. And I'm hoping to, I keep saying this, I really want to live stream sometime. I'm really playing Friday the 13th right now, and I'm having a lot of fun. It feels like a fun game to stream. I might try at some point over at Eldorian BP, which is my Twitch channel. Awesome. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
I will J up for that, for sure. I will be there spectating. I don't have the game, but I started playing the flavor of the month game, PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, and
I've been wanting to play that too.
Dang, it's an interesting. My nerves can't handle it, man. It's so intense the whole time. I tried to stream it, tried to do like a little celebration drinking stream for hitting 800 followers on my Twitch account, and it did not go well. We switched to Overwatch pretty quick. But there's a mode where you can go in with a whole squad of like 4, and I think that would be really fun to do. So anyways, as for me, you can find me everywhere at KickedTripod, or just go to KickedTripod.com and you can find links to the shows and my Twitch and Discords and everything else. I would also love for you to come join me on my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/KickedTripod. I took a couple days off because Katie just got back from Austin, and so she's back, and then she's leaving tomorrow. So I didn't stream yesterday or today, but I will be going into the future. So twitch.tv/KickedTripod again. Love to hang out with you, but that's going to do it for us. Thank you for joining us for episode 111 of Well Met. You can find us on twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 7 p.m. Pacific time on Mondays. And also find more awesome Hearthstone content throughout the week at hearthstone.blizzpro.com. Tweet us at WellMedPodcast, or email us at wellmed@blizzpro.com with comments, questions, and ideas you have for the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for episode 111. We'll see you next week for 112. Bye, guys.